Racist teacher humiliates a black girl. You are a different and defenseless girl, she said mockingly. But when it was discovered who her father really was, everyone's legs trembled. Talia Santamaria, with her gaze fixed on her notebook, drew small circles in the margin of the page, trying to ignore the furtive glances from some of her classmates. The classroom at the prestigious San Rafael School, with its large windows and shiny desks, always felt hostile to her, as if it were a stage for a daily trial. The murmurs of stifled laughter and barely concealed conversations surrounded her, but Talia focused on keeping her head down, avoiding the eyes of Adela Montiel, her teacher. It was the last class of the day, and the tension in the air was palpable. Talia already knew that, at any moment, Adela would single her out. She always did, as if it were a ritual. She seemed to have a special knack for picking out Talia among all the students, waiting for the opportunity to ridicule her in front of everyone. Today would be no different. Santamaria, Adela suddenly said without looking up from the papers on her desk, "Could you tell us what you think about what we just read?" Talia swallowed hard, knowing that no matter what she said, the teacher's response would always be the same: disdain. "Well, I think the text is about how power," Talia began, trying to form a coherent answer. Before she could finish the sentence, Adela interrupted her with an ironic smile on her lips. "Oh sure, power. Like you know anything about that, right?" she said in a sarcastic tone that made several students let out stifled giggles. Talia felt her face flush with embarrassment. It wasn't the first time Adela had made such comments, loaded with insinuations that only she seemed to understand, but that struck Talia with precision. "Well, maybe if you paid more attention instead of drawing in your notebooks, you'd better understand what the text is about." Adela shot Talia a cold look, a look that always came with barely disguised contempt. The classroom burst into nervous laughter, but Talia remained silent. She knew that any attempt to defend herself would only make things worse. Her mother always told her not to let other people's words affect her, but at that moment, in that room full of mocking stares, Adela's words weighed more than any motherly advice. When the bell rang, signaling the end of class, Talia quickly gathered her things. She wanted to leave before anyone else could stop her or say anything. As she walked toward the door, she felt a gentle hand on her shoulder. It was Camila, her only friend at that school. "Are you okay?" Camila asked in a low voice, her eyes reflecting concern. "Yes," Talia lied. "I just want to go home." Camila nodded, understanding without the need for more words. The two left the classroom in silence, but before they could reach the lobby, Talia stopped. She knew she had to do something, that she could no longer endure Adela's constant abuse. "I have to tell my dad," she murmured, almost to herself. Camila looked at her in surprise. She knew who Talia's father was, Leon Santamaria, the most powerful man in the school, the president of the board of directors, and an influential businessman. If Leon found out what was happening, everything would change. But Talia had always been afraid of burdening her father with her problems. "Are you sure?" Camila asked, hesitant. Talia clenched her fists. She wasn't completely sure, but something inside her told her she could no longer stay silent. Every day, Adela found a new way to belittle her, to make her feel inferior, and Talia couldn't take it anymore. "Yes, I'm sure," she said, her voice filled with more determination. "I can't keep letting her treat me like this." Later that night, after dinner, Talia mustered up the courage to talk to her father. Leon, as always, was in his office, reviewing work documents. The warm light from the desk lamp illuminated his focused face, but when he saw his daughter timidly peeking through the door, he set the papers aside. "What's wrong, Talia?" he asked with a smile, though his tone was always serious. Talia slowly approached, feeling her heart pound in her chest. She took a deep breath before speaking. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something that's happening at school." Her voice trembled a little, but she tried to keep it steady. Leon looked at her intently, frowning. "Of course, tell me. What's going on?" It's Miss Montiel, Adela Montiel," Talia began. She's always picking on me. She humiliates me in front of the class. Today, for example, she made everyone laugh at me when I try to answer a question. I don't know what to do, but I don't want to feel like this every day anymore." Leon was silent for a moment. Talia had expected an immediate reaction, an outburst of anger or an offer of help, but instead, her father seemed to be assessing the situation. After what felt like an eternity, Leon finally spoke. "Are you sure it's that bad, Talia?" he asked, his voice low and cautious. "Sometimes teachers can be tough because they want us to learn to be stronger." Talia felt her heart sink. Her father didn't understand. Or worse, he didn't want to understand. But before she could respond, Leon interrupted her. "Anyway, I'll look into it. I don't want anyone hurting you, but we need to make sure you're not exaggerating." Leon smiled at her, as if that could reassure her. Talia nodded, though her heart felt heavier than before. She knew her father loved her, but sometimes she felt he never really understood what was happening in her life. She knew the school and its reputation meant a lot to him, and that if it came to exposing a teacher as important as Adela Montiel, he wouldn't do it without proof. The next day, Talia returned to school with a mix of determination and fear. She didn't know if her father would do anything, but she could no longer endure the situation in silence. However, things didn't go as she expected. Instead of getting better, everything got worse. Adela Montiel looked at her with more hatred than ever in the classroom. Talia didn't know how, but it seemed the teacher had sensed the change, as if she knew her position was in danger. "Santa Maria," Adela said with a forced smile, "it seems you've been very quiet lately. Is there something you'd like to share with the class?" Talia, her heart racing, shook her head. "No, miss. What a shame. Because I thought someone like you would enjoy talking about what makes you different. Or maybe you don't know. But history has a way of repeating itself, and people like you always end up on the margins." The comment felt like a stab. It wasn't just an academic critique. It was personal. Talia felt her throat tighten. But this time, she couldn't stay silent. "I don't know what her problem with me is," said Talia with a trembling voice. "But I'm not going to let her treat me like this anymore." The classroom fell silent. No one dared to laugh, or even look at Adela. Everyone knew that something had changed in Talia. Adela looked at her coldly, but something in her eyes betrayed a flicker of nervousness. She knew that Talia was Leon Santamaria's daughter. She knew that if Leon found out, her future at the school would be in jeopardy. But her hatred was stronger than her reason. Talia left the classroom, breathing heavily, her heart racing. She knew she had crossed a line, but she also knew she couldn't go back. Something was going to change. It had to change. Talia walked quickly down the school halls, still breathing hard after the confrontation with Professor Adela Montiel. Although she tried to keep her composure on the outside, inside, everything in her was trembling. Every step she took away from the classroom pulled her further from fear and closer to a mix of euphoria and terror. She had spoken up. For the first time, she hadn't let Adela humiliate her without responding. But now what? The professor's words echoed in her mind. "We'll see how long that courage lasts." It was more than a threat. Talia knew Adela wouldn't let it go. Not after what had just happened. As she crossed the schoolyard, she saw her friend Camila in the distance, running towards her with a worried expression on her face. Camila had heard what had happened in class and couldn't believe it. "Talia, what did you do?" asked Camila, nearly out of breath, when she finally caught up. "I heard what you said to Adela. Are you okay?" Talia looked at her, trying to smile, but her face reflected the weight of the situation. "I don't know if I'm okay," she admitted, lowering her gaze. I just know I couldn't stay silent any longer. Adela isn't going to stop, Camila. If I keep letting her do this, it'll never end. Camila nodded, though fear was still reflected in her eyes. She knew how powerful Professor Montiel was at the school, and she knew that Talia had just done something dangerous. Have you told your dad? Asked Camila in a whisper. Talia shook her head. I tried to tell him something last night, but he doesn't get it, Talia replied, sighing in frustration. He thinks teachers are tough because they want us to be better. He doesn't see what's really going on. Camila bit her lip, deep in thought. She knew Talia was trapped in a complicated situation, but she also knew they couldn't give up. They needed to find a way to make her voice heard. Maybe you should try talking to the principal, Camila suggested. Talia looked at her, doubtful. Principal Solano? I don't think she cares. She and Adela are close, and if I tell her anything, she'll probably tell Adela, and things will just get worse. Camila didn't know what else to say, but her concern for her friend was evident. Both knew they were up against something much bigger than just a classroom misunderstanding. I'm so sorry, Talia, Camila said finally. But no matter what happens, I'll be with you. Talia gave her a weak smile and appreciated her friend's gesture. Though she knew Camila couldn't do much to stop Adela, having her by her side gave her some comfort. Later that afternoon, when Talia arrived home, the atmosphere in the house was tense, as it had been since her mother, Marina, had returned. Since her return, her parents' relationship seemed to fall apart more each day. Leon barely spoke to Marina, and when he did, it was in quick, reproach-filled whispers. Talia went up to her room, trying to escape the suffocating atmosphere of the house. She threw herself on the bed and closed her eyes, hoping sleep would take her away from everything. But just as she began to drift off, she heard her parents' voices on the other side of the door. We can't go on like this, Leon, said Marina, her voice full of anguish. Talia needs the truth. We can't hide it any longer. Talia's heart began to race. What was her mother talking about? What truth? Now's not the time, Marina, Leon replied coldly and sharply. Talia already has enough problems at school. She doesn't need more confusion in her life right now. Talia, feeling the urge to know more, quietly got out of bed and moved closer to the door. She pressed her ear to the door to hear better, her heart in her throat. We can't keep this from her any longer. She has the right to know who her real father is, Leon. Her words dropped like a bomb in Talia's mind. Talia's world seemed to freeze. Her legs shook, and her whole body went numb. Her real father? Leon wasn't her father? Everything she had believed until now seemed to crumble in a matter of seconds. Leon let out a tired sigh. You think you're doing her a favor by telling her that now? He said almost disdainfully. Talia sees me as her father. She doesn't need to know about that man. He's already dead, Marina. Don't ruin her life with this. Marina was silent for a moment, but when she spoke again, her voice was filled with pain. You can't keep hiding this, Leon. Talia deserves to know the truth, even if it's painful. Talia stepped back, feeling the weight of that conversation crushing her. Who was she really? Was Leon not her father? Why had her mother come back now with these revelations? She walked silently to her bed and collapsed, unable to process what she had just heard. Her life, already plagued by problems at school, had just become even more complicated. She knew she couldn't face all of this alone, but she also didn't know how to face her parents after what she had just discovered. The next day at school, Talia felt more distant than ever. She couldn't focus on the classes. Her mother's words kept echoing in her head, and though she wanted to tell Camila, she wasn't ready to talk about it yet. In the classroom, Adela Montiel noticed the change in Talia. Her expression was even harsher, as if she were looking for a way to crush the small spark of courage she had seen in Talia the day before. Santa Maria, You seem even more lost today than usual, Adela said with a malicious smile. Is there something you'd like to share with the class? Talia slowly looked up, but didn't say anything. She didn't have the strength to face Adela that day. Not after what she had discovered at home. No? What a surprise, Adela continued as the class watched in silence. Maybe one day you'll learn to pay attention like the others. The usual giggles were heard, but this time Talia didn't even feel them. Her mind was elsewhere. As the class went on, Talia sank deeper into her thoughts, trying to make sense of everything she had overheard. Later, during lunch, she finally told Camila. The words tumbled out, her voice cracked with confusion and pain. Leon isn't my real father, Talia said quietly, staring at the lunch table, not daring to look up. I heard it last night. My mom and he were arguing. They haven't told me, but I heard everything. Camila stared at her, wide-eyed, unable to say anything for a moment. Talia, how do you feel? She finally asked, not knowing exactly what to say. I don't know, Talia replied, her voice dull. Everything I believed. I don't know who I am anymore. Camila took her hand and squeezed it tightly. No matter what happens, you're still the same Talia, and I'm here for you. The day ended without further confrontations with Adela, but Talia knew the storm hadn't passed yet. At home, her family was slowly falling apart, and at school, Adela was still waiting for her chance to destroy what little remained of her self-esteem. Talia had to make a decision. Would she talk to her father about what she had heard? And what would she do about Miss Montiel? She knew the answers wouldn't come easily, but she also knew she could no longer stay silent. That night, as she stared at her bedroom ceiling, Talia promised herself that, no matter what happened, she would find a way to uncover the whole truth. Not just about her family, but also about who she was and who she wanted to be. The next day, Talia woke up early, the distant sound of birds barely audible through her open bedroom window. The night before had been long, filled with thoughts intertwined with the memories of the words she had overheard from her parents. The knowledge that Leon wasn't her real father weighed heavily on her chest like a stone, something she couldn't easily shake off. She knew her life wouldn't be the same from now on, and that weight made her feel vulnerable, especially with everything going on at school. As she got dressed for school, she looked at her reflection in the mirror with a sense of disconnect. Who was she really? The image of a 12-year-old girl stared back at her, but that girl felt like a stranger. She wondered if she would ever be able to face her parents, especially her mother, and demand the whole truth. Talia knew things couldn't go on like this for much longer. Arriving at San Rafael School, the atmosphere felt more oppressive than ever. The usual giggles and furtive glances that she had always sensed around her seemed more intense that day. But Talia no longer had room in her mind for the teasing. Her attention was focused on the secrets she had uncovered in her own home, on the mysteries surrounding her life. When she entered the classroom, she felt Adela Montiel's piercing gaze on her. The teacher was sitting behind her desk, watching her with that same cold smile that Talia had grown to fear. But something in Talia had changed. She no longer felt like the fragile girl she had been in the days before. Talia, though still wounded by the recent discoveries, felt that the truth had somehow made her stronger. Adela called her to the front of the class shortly after the lesson began. Santa Maria, why don't you share with us your thoughts on today's text? Adela said, her voice laced with venomous sarcasm. Maybe this time you'll surprise us with something useful. Adela's words echoed through the room, dripping with malice. But Talia took a deep breath and stepped forward. She knew everyone was waiting for her to fail, to humiliate herself once again in front of the class. But this time, something was different. She felt stronger, more determined. The text is about how people can be shaped by their circumstances, about how our lives are influenced by factors we can't always control. Her voice was clear, firm, but it's also about how we can find our own truth, even when the world pushes us in another direction. The class fell silent, surprised by the confident tone in Talia's voice. Even Adela seemed momentarily disarmed by her response. "Interesting interpretation, Santa Maria," Adela finally said, regaining her composure. "Though I doubt you fully understand what that means." Talia didn't respond. She didn't need to. She was no longer seeking Adela's approval, nor did she fear her words. She had realized that true power didn't lie in what others thought of her, but in how she chose to face those opinions. The class continued, and for the first time in a long while, Talia felt like she was in control. Though the feeling of her home falling apart lingered, she knew she couldn't afford to crumble at school too. She needed to hold on to that small spark of strength she had found. At the end of the day, as she packed her things into her backpack, Camila approached her with a look of relief. "You spoke so well in class," she exclaimed, smiling. "I can't believe how calm you were in front of Adela." Talia looked at her and, for the first time in days, smiled genuinely. "I don't know how I did it," she admitted. "I just couldn't let her break me again." "You're doing it," said Camila with admiration. "But what are you going to do about your family? Are you going to talk to them?" Talia sighed. That was the real question that tormented her. While she had managed to handle Adela for a day, the problem at home was much bigger, much more complex. She knew she couldn't just ignore it. "I have to," she finally said. "I don't know how, but I need to confront my mom. I need her to tell me the whole truth." Later at home, Talia felt like a bomb about to explode. She walked down the hallway leading to her father's office, but her feet stopped in front of her mother's room. She took a deep breath and knocked gently on the door. "Mom?" she asked, her voice trembling. The door slowly opened, revealing Marina sitting on her bed with a tired expression. Seeing the seriousness on her daughter's face, Marina knew the moment had come. "Talia, do you want to talk?" she asked softly, knowing exactly what her daughter wanted to know. Talia nodded, and Marina motioned for her to sit next to her on the bed. The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with everything neither of them dared to say. Finally, it was Talia who broke the silence. "I heard what you said last night," she confessed, looking at her mother with eyes full of questions. "I heard that Leon isn't my real father. Is that true?" Marina closed her eyes for a moment, as if gathering the courage to answer was the hardest thing she'd ever done. "It's true, Talia," she said, her voice breaking. "Leon isn't your biological father." Talia felt the air leave her lungs. Though she already knew, hearing it out loud was a devastating confirmation. Yet, there were still more questions. "Who is my real father?" she asked, her throat tight. Marina looked at her sadly. "Your real father was a good man, but life's circumstances separated us. When I found out I was pregnant with you, he was already gone. He had left. And then I met Leon. He helped me move on, gave me a new life, a life I wanted to give you, thinking it was the best for you." Talia processed the information in silence. Part of her wanted to get angry, to yell at her mother for keeping something so important from her all her life. But another part of her understood that her mother had tried to protect her, though in the worst possible way. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Talia asked, her voice cracking. "Why wait until now?" Marina took her daughter's hands in hers. "I was scared, Talia," she admitted. "Scared that you would hate me for not telling you the truth. Scared that, once you knew, Leon would stop being your father because even though he's not your biological father, he has loved you as if he were since the day you were born. But now I see I can't keep hiding it." Talia looked at her mother with eyes full of confusion and pain. She knew her mother had done what she thought was right, but she also knew that decision had left a mark on her. The truth had come out, but the wounds it left were far from healing. "I need to think, Mom," she said finally, pulling her hands away from Marina's and standing up from the bed. I don't know what to feel right now. Marina nodded, understanding. Take your time, Talia. I just want you to know I'm here for whatever you need. Talia left the room with a heavy heart. Though she had gotten part of the truth she was looking for, the emptiness inside her kept growing. Nothing she had discovered so far brought her the peace she longed for. But at least, now she had one certainty. Her life was changing, and she would have to find a way to move forward. With her mind still full of unanswered questions, Talia returned to her room, knowing that her real challenge was just beginning. Talia spent the following days in a state of confusion and sadness, the weight of the revelation about her true identity following her everywhere. She had avoided talking to her father, and although she knew she would eventually have to face him, she wasn't ready yet. Her world felt as though it were built on fragile foundations, and any wrong move would cause it all to collapse. At school, things weren't improving. Even though Talia had shown unexpected firmness in front of Adela Montiel during their last confrontation, she knew that the teacher hadn't forgotten or forgiven her audacity. Adela watched her with an icier stare than ever, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Talia, however, stood firm. She knew she couldn't allow Adela to destroy her too, not when her personal life was already full of uncertainty. One morning, after a particularly tense class in which Adela barely spoke to Talia, Camila approached her during recess. She knew her friend was going through something much bigger than just school problems, but Talia hadn't shared all the details. "Are you okay?" Camila asked, sitting next to her on the bench in the yard. Talia nodded, though she knew it wasn't entirely true. "I'm surviving," she replied quietly, looking at the ground. Camila watched her for a moment before speaking again. "Talia, I've been thinking about what you told me the other day, about your mom and your dad. I can't imagine what it must feel like to find out something like that. But I want you to know that you don't have to face all of this alone." Talia looked at her, feeling a lump in her throat. Camila's support was the only thing keeping her connected to something stable at that moment. "Thank you, Camila. Really. I don't know what I'd do without you," she said, giving a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Have you talked to your dad about what you heard?" Camila asked gently. Talia shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. I don't know how I'm going to tell him. I feel like everything will fall apart even more if I do." Camila nodded, understanding. "Sometimes things have to break so that we can rebuild them better, Talia. Maybe it's better to face it now, before it keeps growing inside you." Talia knew her friend was right. The conversation with her father was inevitable, but every time she thought about looking him in the eye and asking if he knew the truth about her paternity, a visceral fear paralyzed her. The day went on, but the conversation with Camila left Talia with an uneasiness that wouldn't go away. As she walked home after school, the cold wind hit her face, reminding her how isolated she felt. She decided that tonight she would do it. She would talk to Leon. She needed answers, and she couldn't live with the doubt any longer. When she got home, the usual tension between her parents was palpable. Leon was in his office, as always, reviewing documents with the focus of a man who lived for his work. Talia approached the door, her heart pounding. She took a deep breath and knocked gently. "Dad?" she said, opening the door just a few inches. Leon looked up from his papers and smiled slightly when he saw her. "Come in, Talia. What's going on?" he asked, putting the documents aside. Talia stepped in, closing the door behind her. The silence in the room became heavy immediately, and for a moment, Talia hesitated whether she could really ask the question. But she knew she couldn't keep hiding. "Dad, I need to talk to you about something important," she began, her voice trembling. Leon frowned, noticing his daughter's serious tone. "Sure, tell me." Talia bit her lip, her hands trembling slightly. "The other day, I heard Mom say something. Something about you not being my real father." The silence that followed was deafening. Leon looked at her, his face impassive for a moment, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of surprise and pain. Talia braced herself for what was coming, for the conversation she had feared ever since she accidentally heard the truth. Leon finally sighed, running a hand over his face. "Talia, I didn't want you to find out this way. I wanted everything to be different," he said in a soft tone, but full of weariness. "Yes, it's true. I'm not your biological father, but that doesn't change anything for me. I've loved and raised you as if you were my own daughter since the day you were born." Talia felt the tears well up in her eyes. Even though she knew Leon loved her, hearing that confirmation didn't take away the pain of having lived her whole life without knowing the truth. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked, her voice breaking. "Why hide something so important from me?" Leon stood up from his chair and walked over to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Your mother and I thought it was best for you. We wanted you to have a normal life, not to carry the weight of a complicated past. But now I see we kept it from you for too long." Talia looked at him, searching for something in his face that might calm the whirlwind in her heart. But even though she understood her father's intentions, she couldn't help but feel betrayed. "I don't know what to do with all this," she admitted, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I don't know who I am, Dad." Leon hugged her gently, and Talia allowed herself to relax for a moment in that familiar gesture. "You are my daughter," he whispered. "You always have been, and you always will be, no matter who your biological father was." Despite Leon's comforting words, Talia knew the wounds wouldn't heal overnight. She still had so many questions. About her mother, about the man who had been her biological father, and about what all of this meant for her future. That night, Talia lay awake in her bed, thinking about the conversation she had had with her father. She knew now that she needed to talk to her mother again, to understand everything that had happened in her life before she was born. But she also knew that her relationship with Leon, though complicated, remained strong. He was her father, even if they didn't share the same blood. But as she tried to find some peace, her thoughts kept returning to school, to Adela Montiel. Talia realized that facing her parents was only half the battle. Adela was still there, watching her every move at school, waiting for the moment she could break her again. Talia took a deep breath and promised herself she wouldn't let Adela destroy her. She had survived the truth about her family, and in some way, that made her stronger. She didn't know how, but she would find a way to beat Adela too. The next day would be crucial, but this time, Talia felt she had a small spark of hope, a strength born from facing her biggest fear, the truth. As the shadows of the night enveloped her room, Talia closed her eyes, allowing herself, for the first time in days, to feel that maybe, just maybe, everything might be okay in the end. Morning came too soon for Talia, but unlike other days, she woke up with a sense of relief mixed with a new determination. The conversation with her father, though painful, had lifted some of the weight off her chest. Now, she knew that although Leon wasn't her biological father, he was still her father in every way that mattered. And that gave her some strength, a foundation to lean on as she tried to piece her life back together. When she arrived at San Rafael School, she felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. She knew that day would be hard. Adela Montiel wouldn't leave her alone after their recent confrontations. But something inside Talia had changed, something deeper than the fear she used to feel in the professor's classes. She had survived the most devastating revelation about her family, and she couldn't allow Adela to keep breaking her. Not this time. Talia walked to her class with her head held high, her steps more confident than usual. As she entered the classroom, she felt the stares of some classmates who were already seated. She had heard the rumors in the hallways, whispers from other students talking about her confrontation with Adela days before. But this time, those stares didn't bother her as much as before. She ignored them and sat in her usual spot, calmly taking out her books. Adela Montiel walked into the classroom a few minutes later with her typical air of authority. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on Talia. The mocking smile that usually adorned her face when she looked at Talia grew wider, but Talia didn't look away. They faced off in silence, a battle without words. Talia knew Adela was looking for a way to put her in her place, to remind her who was in control. But Talia wasn't going to give in, not after everything she had been through. The class began, and as usual, Adela didn't miss the chance to put Talia in an uncomfortable position. "Santa Maria," she said loudly, making the entire class turn their heads toward Talia. "Could you explain to us why you think Plato's theory of justice is still relevant today?" Talia took a deep breath. She knew Adela wasn't really interested in her answer. She just wanted the chance to humiliate her, as always. But Talia wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. Plato believed that justice was the balance between the parts of the soul and of society. Talia began, her voice clear. For him, justice wasn't just an individual virtue, but a way to govern people's behavior in a community. "I think that's still relevant today because we live in a world where injustice is still common, where people are treated unequally for reasons that don't always make sense." The classroom fell silent for a moment. Adela seemed momentarily surprised by the confidence in Talia's voice, but she quickly recovered, letting out a brief, sarcastic laugh. "Well, Santa Maria, it seems you've been studying," Adela said, narrowing her eyes. "Although, of course, theory sounds nice. The problem comes when reality hits you in the face, and you realize not everyone has what it takes to be fair, right?" The comment had a hidden edge, a veiled insinuation that Talia picked up on immediately. But this time, she wouldn't let Adela's words break her. "Maybe that's exactly what we need to change," Talia replied calmly. "The idea that justice is only for a select few." Adela stayed silent for a few seconds, and the rest of the class watched the confrontation attentively. Talia felt a wave of nervousness, but kept it under control. Adela seemed to hesitate for a moment, but then she regained her rigid posture. "Maybe one day you'll understand, Santa Maria," the teacher replied, her tone colder than before. "But for now, let's continue with the lesson." The rest of the lesson passed in tense silence, but Talia felt like she had won a small battle. Adela hadn't managed to break her as she had so many times before. As they left the classroom, Camila quickly approached Talia, a proud smile on her face. "You were amazing," Camila exclaimed, nearly bouncing with excitement. "I can't believe how you answered her." Talia smiled, though she still felt the adrenaline coursing through her body. "Thanks, Camila," she replied, letting out a sigh of relief. "It wasn't easy, but I felt like I had to do it." "You gave her a lesson," Camila said, laughing. "Maybe now Adela will leave you alone." Talia doubted it. She knew that people like Adela didn't back down easily. But something had changed in the balance of power between them. Adela no longer saw her as a helpless girl. Talia had stood her ground, and while the teacher still held authority in the classroom, Talia had regained control over herself. However, as she walked toward the school's exit, Talia couldn't stop thinking about what would come next. Adela was vindictive, and Talia knew this wasn't over yet. When she arrived home that afternoon, the tension in her family was still palpable, but Talia felt more capable of handling it. She knew she still needed to talk to her mother and fully understand everything that had happened in the past, but facing Adela had given her a small dose of confidence. Talia was no longer the same girl who had started at San Rafael months ago. Now she realized that she had the power to influence what happened in her life. That night, after having dinner in an uncomfortable silence with her parents, Talia decided it was time to talk to her mother. She went to Marina's room and gently knocked on the door. "Mom, can I talk to you?" she asked, peeking through the slightly open door. Marina, who was sitting on the bed reading, nodded with a faint smile. "Of course, sweetheart. Come in, sit down," she said, motioning toward the edge of the bed. Talia sat down slowly, gathering her thoughts. She didn't know how to begin, but she knew she had to. "I've been thinking a lot about what you told me about my real father," Talia began, without looking at her directly. "And I still have a lot of questions. I want to know more about him, and why you never told me the truth before." Marina set the book aside and sighed deeply. "I knew this moment would come," she said, her voice full of sadness. "And I want to be honest with you, Talia. It wasn't an easy decision for me. I loved your biological father, but he wasn't the man I thought he was. When he left, I knew I had to protect you. Leon helped me do that, and that's why I decided he would be the only father you would know." "What happened to my real father?" Talia asked, her voice trembling. "Why did he leave?" Marina looked at her, and in her eyes was a mixture of pain and regret. "He left because he couldn't handle the responsibilities. He was a complicated man, full of internal demons he never wanted to face. I loved him, Talia, but I also knew he wasn't the kind of man who could take care of us. That's why I went with Leon. I didn't want you to grow up in the midst of that instability." Talia absorbed the words, trying to reconcile the image her mother painted with the idea of a father she had never known. Though the truth was harsh, it also brought her some peace. She understood that her mother had done what she thought was best to protect her. "Thank you for telling me the truth," Talia finally said, her voice soft. "I can't say I understand everything yet, but at least now I know who I am." Marina nodded, tears in her eyes. "I've always wanted the best for you, Talia. I just hope that one day you can forgive me for keeping this secret for so long." Talia didn't respond immediately. She knew forgiveness was a process, and that it would take time to fully heal. But now, at least, she felt one step closer to finding her own truth. That night, as she got ready for bed, Talia felt something inside her had been released. Although the road ahead was still uncertain, she no longer felt as lost. She had faced so much in such a short time, but she was still standing, and that in itself was a victory. The cold autumn wind blew fiercely as Talia walked through the halls of San Rafael School, feeling something heavier than the breeze surrounding her. After the intense weeks she had lived through, her mind was still full of questions, but also a strange sense of relief. The conversations with her father and mother had opened wounds, but they had also brought clarity. While the uncertainty about her real father remained, Talia was beginning to feel that she could face the truth without fear. When she arrived at her classroom, she noticed that the atmosphere was unusually quiet. Some classmates glanced at her, while others ignored her. Since her last confrontation with Adela Montiel, things hadn't been the same. Talia had won a small victory, but she knew the battle wasn't over yet. Adela was a woman who neither forgave nor forgot. As she placed her backpack on her seat, she noticed Camila approaching her quickly, a tense expression on her face. "Talia, you need to see this," Camila said, almost whispering. Camila held out her phone, and on the screen was a message circulating through the school's group chats. Talia read the words in disbelief. "The director's secret daughter, a farce at San Rafael," read the headline of the message. And below, it detailed her story. The truth about Leon Santamaria not being her biological father, and how Talia had been raised with a secret that now everyone knew. Talia felt the world collapse around her. Her secret, her greatest pain, was now the subject of public ridicule. She didn't understand how someone could have discovered the truth, but she knew this was going to change everything. The glances from her classmates were no longer just curious. They were now filled with judgment. "Who did this?" Talia asked, trying to stay calm, but her voice betrayed the panic rising inside her. Camila shook her head. "I don't know. It started circulating this morning, and now everyone's reading it. I'm so sorry, Talia. This isn't fair. Talia took a deep breath, trying not to let the growing anxiety overwhelm her. The message was clear. Someone wanted to hurt her, and the person who most fit that profile was Adela Montiel. Although she had no proof, the timing couldn't be a coincidence. Talia knew that Adela hated her, and this seemed like a subtle and cruel way to get revenge. For the rest of the morning, the stares and whispers became more evident. Even some teachers seemed to look at her with a mix of curiosity and pity. Talia felt like she was being dissected by every glance, as if her personal life had ceased to be her own and now belonged to everyone. Finally, it was time for Adela Montiel's class. Talia entered with her heart racing, but with a quiet determination inside. She wouldn't let Adela destroy her, not after everything she had faced. Adela, as usual, was sitting behind her desk with a satisfied smile on her face. When Talia sat down, she felt the teacher's eyes on her, as if she were enjoying the show. "Before we begin class," Adela said, her tone laden with authority, "I'd like to remind everyone of the importance of discretion and respecting others' privacy." The comment seemed aimed directly at Talia. The sarcasm in Adela's voice was obvious, but Talia decided not to take the bait. Instead, she lifted her head and looked the teacher directly in the eyes. "It's interesting that you say that, Professor," Talia responded, her tone calm but firm. "After all, it seems that some secrets aren't as private as they should be." The classroom fell silent. No one dared move, and eyes darted between Talia and Adela. The teacher's smile faded for a second, surprised by Talia's response, but she quickly regained her composure. "Whatever you're implying, Santa Maria, I suggest you think twice before you speak," Adela said, her voice icy. "You wouldn't want to get yourself into unnecessary trouble." Talia felt the anger bubbling inside her, but she didn't let it take control. She knew she had to be smart in this situation. "I'm not insinuating anything, miss," she responded, keeping calm. "I'm just saying that for someone who insists so much on respect and discretion, it would be wise to practice what they preach." The murmurs among the students began to grow. No one could believe that Talia was speaking that way in front of Adela, the feared teacher who never allowed a word out of place. But Talia knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. Not after everything that had happened. Adela looked at Talia with an intensity that almost seemed like a silent warning. Talia knew she had crossed a line, but she also knew there was no turning back. Adela hated her, and that hate had reached a point where the teacher was willing to destroy her. But Talia wasn't going to be destroyed. The class continued, but the atmosphere was tense, charged with an energy that seemed ready to explode. Talia, though scared of what might come next, also felt stronger than ever. She couldn't control what people thought of her or the damage caused by rumors, but she could control how she responded. After class, as she packed her things into her backpack, Camila approached her again. "I can't believe what you said to her," Camila said, her eyes filled with admiration. "You were so brave." Talia sighed, feeling the exhaustion from the confrontation. "I don't know if it was bravery or desperation," she responded, smiling slightly. "I just know I can't keep letting her win." Camila nodded, understanding. "She won't. You're handling this better than you think." Still, Talia knew the battle wasn't over. Adela was a cunning woman, and if she had gone this far to humiliate her, she wouldn't stop there. But for the first time in a long time, Talia felt like she could face whatever came next. That afternoon, when she got home, Talia decided it was time to talk to her mother again. She knew that although she had made peace with part of the truth, there were still many unanswered questions. Marina was in the kitchen, preparing something for dinner, when Talia walked in. "Mom," Talia said softly, "I think I need to know more about my real father. You told me some things, but I feel like there's more you haven't said." Marina stopped, surprised, and set aside what she was doing. She looked at Talia with a mix of pain and understanding. "I knew you would want to know more, and you deserve to, Talia." She sighed, leaning against the counter. "It's hard for me to talk about this because your biological father wasn't a good man. I didn't tell you before because I wanted to protect you from his legacy, but I also know you deserve the truth." Talia felt her heart race. She knew what was coming wouldn't be easy to hear, but she was ready for the truth. She knew that only by confronting everything in her past could she move forward. Marina began to speak, and with each word, a new layer of the story that Talia didn't know was revealed. Her real father had been a troubled man, someone who had made serious mistakes and hurt many people, including Marina. Talia absorbed the information, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. Although the truth was painful, it also freed her from the burden of uncertainty. That night, as Talia lay in bed, she felt that although things were still complicated, at least now she had more control over her life. She knew who she was and what she needed to do. Adela Montiel was still a threatening shadow, but Talia no longer feared her like before. She had found a strength within herself that she didn't even know she had. With a lighter heart, Talia closed her eyes, allowing herself, for the first time in weeks, a peaceful sleep. The morning sun gently filtered through the windows of San Rafael School, casting long shadows in the hallways, which seemed quieter than usual. Talia, standing in front of her locker, felt an unusual calm. The past few weeks had been a constant test, an emotional roller coaster that had forced her to grow faster than she had imagined. However, that morning, with the truth finally revealed, something inside her had changed. Although the storm of rumors still swirled around her, Talia no longer felt the same weight on her shoulders. As she pulled out her books, she heard Camila approaching from behind. Her friend, as loyal as ever, was watching her with a smile full of complicity. "Today feels different, doesn't it?" Camila commented, leaning against Talia's locker door. "Like something has finally changed for the better." Talia nodded, still smiling. "Yeah, it does. I don't know if it's because I've already faced everything I could at home. If I've just stopped caring so much about what others think." She closed the locker door and turned to Camila. "I just know I'm not afraid like I used to be." Camila looked at her with admiration, unable to help feeling proud of her friend. Talia had come a long way, and now she radiated an inner strength that was palpable. "I'm glad to see you like this, Talia. After everything you've been through, you deserve to feel strong." The two of them began walking toward their first class of the day, but as they did, they noticed a small group of students gathered in a corner of the hallway, whispering among themselves. Talia felt a pang of anxiety, but quickly pushed it aside. She wasn't going to let rumors affect her anymore. However, as they crossed the hallway, one of the girls in the group, Sophia, turned and looked at them with a serious expression. "Talia, you have to see this," she said, holding out her phone. Talia hesitated for a second, but finally took the phone to see what Sophia was showing her. It was a video recorded in Principal Veronica Solano's office, where the principal was arguing with someone, a figure Talia didn't immediately recognize. In the video, Veronica could be heard clearly talking about Adela Montiel's behavior and how she had been warned several times about her unfair treatment of students. "Adela, this has gone too far," Veronica could be heard saying in the video. "I can't keep ignoring her abuses, especially after what she's done to Talia. If she doesn't change, I'll have to take action." Talia felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know who had recorded that video, but its content was revealing. Principal Solano had known about Adela's behavior all along, but until now, hadn't done anything about it. The video seemed like proof that things could change, that finally, someone in a position of power was willing to take action. "Where did this come from?" Talia asked, still surprised by what she had just seen. "Someone posted it last night," Sophia replied. "Now everyone's watching it." Talia handed back the phone, feeling a mix of relief and tension. If Veronica Solano was willing to step in, maybe Adela would finally face the consequences of her actions. But at the same time, Talia knew that Adela wouldn't take this lying down. The rest of the day passed as a strange mix of calm and underlying tension. Rumors about the video spread quickly, and by lunchtime, everyone seemed to be talking about it. Some students, those who had also been victims of Adela's unfair treatment, began to feel a small spark of hope. Talia overheard whispers of other students sharing stories about how Adela had publicly humiliated them or punished them without reason. The fear of the teacher was beginning to fade, and in its place, there was a growing sense that something was about to change. That afternoon, as Talia was getting ready to leave school, she saw Principal Veronica Solano walking quickly toward Adela Montiel's office. Although part of her wanted to walk away, another part urged her to follow. She stopped at a safe distance, close enough to hear what was happening without being seen. "Adela, we need to talk now," Veronica said firmly as she entered the teacher's office. Adela, seated behind her desk, stood up slowly, a look of defiance on her face. "What's going on, Veronica?" Adela responded, crossing her arms. "I'm very busy, as always." Veronica wasn't intimidated. She closed the door behind her and advanced toward Adela's desk, without losing an ounce of her authority. "You know exactly what's going on. I've received too many complaints about your behavior, and now the entire school knows about it thanks to the video going around. I can't protect you anymore, Adela. You've crossed every line." Talia, her heart racing, listened in silence as the tension between the two women grew. "Protect me?" Adela repeated, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "I don't need you to protect me, Veronica. I've always done what I thought was necessary to maintain discipline in this school, and if some students can't handle it, that's not my problem." "That's exactly the problem," Veronica replied, her voice even colder. "Your way of handling things isn't that of an educator. You've crossed lines you shouldn't have, and I allowed it for too long. But that ends now. As of today, you're suspended, and the school board will meet to decide your future at this institution." Adela was silent for a moment, clearly shocked by Veronica's decision. But instead of apologizing or showing any sign of regret, a contained fury appeared on her face. "This is absurd, Veronica. You know I'm one of the best teachers this school has ever had. You can't just get rid of me because some sensitive students are complaining." Veronica didn't let herself be intimidated. "I can, and I will," she responded firmly. "It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions, Adela. You can't keep acting like you're above everyone else." Talia walked away silently, her heart racing. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. Adela Montiel, the teacher who had tormented her so much, would finally face the consequences of her abuses. She felt a wave of relief mixed with disbelief. That night, when she got home, Talia shared what had happened with her mother. Marina listened attentively, and when Talia finished telling the story, her mother smiled proudly. "I always knew you were stronger than you thought, Talia," Marina said, gently stroking her hair. "You've been through so much, but look how you've come through it all." Talia smiled, although she still felt the weight of everything she had lived through. She knew that the battle with Adela Montiel wasn't the only challenge in her life, but she also knew she had overcome something that, months ago, would have seemed impossible. "Sometimes I don't feel that strong," Talia admitted softly. "But I know I can't let fear control me." "And you won't," Marina responded, hugging her. "You've already proven that." Talia let herself be embraced by her mother, feeling for the first time in a long while that things, though complicated, could get better. She knew there were still challenges ahead, but she also knew that, no matter what, she had the strength to face them. The next day, Talia walked to school with a new sense of peace. The stares from her classmates no longer bothered her, and the hallway that once felt hostile now felt neutral, even welcoming. She had learned to face her fears, both at home and at school, and though she knew life would still be a path full of obstacles, she also knew she wasn't alone. As she walked through the halls of San Rafael, Talia realized something important. She had regained control of her life, and she wouldn't let anyone take that away again. What did you think of this story? Tell us in the comments what you would do in a similar situation. We invite you to like, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with your friends or family as a show of support. This motivates us to keep posting exciting stories almost every day. Don't miss the next surprising narrative that's about to appear on your screen. We greatly value having you here with us, and you can click on the links that are appearing on your screen right now. We have an exclusive selection of captivating stories and guaranteed entertainment especially for you. See you in the next video. A hug.